Hi everyone! So in this video we're looking at Chapter 6, Understanding and Assessing Hardware, Evaluating Your System. Well, the chapter is going to go into a whole lot more detail than I am here. Basically what I want to talk about are some of the considerations that you need to keep in mind if you're looking at buying a new computer or a computer. Maybe it's your first ever your own computer. Whatever. If you're buying a computer, some things that you need to think about. So let's take a look at what some of our choices are. First, there's the decision, do I want to go desktop or laptop? Now, for most of you, that's a no-brainer. You want the portability, you're going to go for the laptop. For me, I don't own a laptop. I have a little tablet that I use for reading and for, extremely silly little games, like solitaire and slot machines and that sort of thing. But yeah, no, my workhorse computer is a large system unit desktop computer with a very large monitor since I'm old and blind. And I like it that way. Number one, it's built custom to my needs, which you can't do with a laptop. I mean, there's a lot of customization that you can do, or a lot of specifications that you can have that you can then, search for something that is going to meet those specifications. But actually just choosing every single component yourself, to do that, you're pretty much going to have to go with a desktop. And this one was built specifically for me. There's also the consideration that desktop computers are far more reliable than laptop computers. Think about that. It never gets folded up, tossed in a backpack, tucked under the bus seat, anything like that, thrown in the back of your car as you're going back and forth, doesn't go through airport security. It just sits there. All you need to do is dust it occasionally. Well, more often than I do, apparently. But yeah, the other things that, make a desktop good, no worries about battery life because it's plugged in all the time. It's also plugged in to my house internet. So it's not connected via Wi-Fi. My connection is always there, always good, unless, the whole thing goes kaput, which hasn't happened very often in the time that I've been in this house. I think we've only had an outage maybe once or twice, and then only briefly. So that's kind of nice. Now, obviously, we do have Wi-Fi in the house for everybody's, mobile devices, their tablets and laptops. Everybody else in the house has a laptop but me. Uh, so their tablets, laptops, smartphones, including my smartphone, of course. We've got Wi-Fi for that. Yeah, don't discount the joys of a desktop computer. Now, la admittedly, they don't have the mobility that you have with a laptop. And for some people, that's the factor. They've got to have that ability to grab it and go and use it wherever they happen to be. For you, obviously, the laptop is going to be the thing that you want to go with. There are some compromises. Uh, well, not so many compromises between desktop versus laptop. But, if you're considering like a tablet, there are some compromises between laptop and tablet, like a Surface, which has, the touch screen of a tablet, but the functionality of a laptop and a lot more of the capabilities of a laptop. But, you know, laptops have their advantage, but their battery life is compromised by their extra portability, and their performance features. You also have to take into consideration how hot that thing is going to get sitting on your lap all the time, which is something that I never have to worry about. Now, tablets, of course, are very lightweight. They can be very functional. Again, as I said, I use a tablet for all of my casual reading and, well, a lot of my reading. I very seldom buy physical books anymore because, who wants to clutter up their bookshelves with things like that? Usually the only books that I physically buy are ones, reference books for weaving or embroidery where they have, beautiful illustrations and pictures that I want to have to refer to all the time, or art books, souvenir books from museums that I've visited, places like that. Um, but, you know, think about it, because you are going to be the determiner of what works best for you. Okay? So once you've determined what physical kind of computer it is that you need, the next thing to think about is the processor. Now, the better the processor, the better performance. The more you're going to get out of that computer. And of course, one of the things that you want to think about is how many cores that processor has. It's almost impossible anymore to find a single core processor. Even the cheapest of laptops that I've seen for sale currently, and there's a lot of them on sale right now with the back to school nonsense going on, are dual cores, which means that your processor is actually capable of multi-processing, not just multitasking, jumping back and forth between tasks very quickly. As a matter of fact, so quickly that you, as a slow-brained human, believe me, I'm a slow-brained human too. I'm not saying that to be disparaging in any way. It's just computers are so much faster than we are. But multitasking, they go back and forth so fast between tasks that it seems like those things are happening at the same time, but they're not. If you have more than one core, then they actually are doing multiple tasks at once. Two things can be happening at once. Now, dual core, of course, would be the minimum that you would want for any kind of a laptop or other portable device. But quad core is better. See, the use of multiple cores on one CPU chip, as I said, allows the execution of two or more sets of instructions at the same time. Okay? That's very worth remembering. That's why I put it on a slide. Okay? Here we see it in action. This is a quad core. So one core is handling playing whatever music you're listening to. Another one is handling your web browsing. Another one is running a virus scan for you. And another one is handling gaming. How you're doing all four of those things at once, I'm not sure, but the processor can do it. So, the more cores you have, the better. Now, I don't think you're going to see more than 4 on your average reasonable laptop. Super high-end ones, yes. Desktops, definitely. But for a mid-priced laptop, 2 to 4 cores is probably what you're going to be looking at. Okay. Now, other things that affect how well that processor works. The clock speed. How many times per second that processor can go through the machine cycle. That's fetch, decode, execute, and store. Those are the 4 things that have to happen for a complete machine cycle. Again, fetch, decode, execute, and store. Fetch an instruction, decode the instruction, execute the instruction, and store the result. Okay? The higher the clock speed, the more work you're getting done at well, not at one time, but in a specific time span. Okay? And we measure this in gigahertz or gigacycles. A hertz is a cycle. And that means billions of cycles per second. Anywhere from 2.5 to 5.5 billions of cycles per second. That's up to 5.5, maybe even more now, who knows, billion actions that processor can do per second. I don't know about you, but that kind of blows my mind just a little bit. Okay. We talked about number of cores. Another thing that can affect your performance is the amount of cache memory. Okay. This is something that you want to think about. This is not the same thing as RAM memory, but that's also very important. Cache memory and RAM memory determine how quickly things can be got from storage into regular storage into your processor. And cache memory and RAM memory have to do with that. Okay, let's look at them. I love this illustration. It's been around for a while, but it's still quite relevant. Okay, on the CPU itself, and therefore getting stuff to it the fastest are some very small but very high speed registers. These are the things that the processor is working on, like right that second, right that millisecond, right that gigas, whatever, tiny portion of a second. What was I looking for? Nanosecond. Yeah. Okay. Very small, but very, very high speed. Okay. Next, we go into the cache memory. These are high-speed memory areas, not as high speed as the registers, but a little bit bigger. Level 1, sometimes even level 2, can be right there on the processor itself. Maybe not, maybe right next to it. The farther away from the processor they get, the bigger they can be. Okay? So they can hold more information. Okay? This is information that's being brought out of storage, just basic storage, into these high-speed memory areas. Okay? The closer they are, the higher speed they are, the sooner they can get information into the processor, therefore the faster you get work done. Okay? The next level down is physical RAM. Now that's something, see, these are the RAM chips over there. You can see them with the little stripies there on the left side in the system box itself. That's something that you can configure fairly easily in both a laptop and a desktop computer. You always want to look at something where the RAM is upgradable, okay? Where you can add in an additional RAM chip. Okay? I mean, buy the most you can afford when you get the computer, but make sure that you can add more at a later date if you want to. Either there's an empty slot or that slot will hold a bigger RAM chip if you need to. Most desktops, you can have room for extra RAM chips. Laptops, not so easy, but oftentimes that RAM can be changed out for one with more memory in it. Okay. Virtual memory, this is part of your hard drive, and it's configured in advance to be there to be used if your RAM turns out to be inadequate at the moment. Like you're trying to do so much at one time that the RAM just can't handle it. So part of your hard drive is configured to act as temporary RAM, and that's called virtual memory. Okay? Doesn't get used all the time. Depending on how good your RAM is, maybe it doesn't get used at all. But if you think maybe you can't afford a whole lot of RAM or as much as you'd like, look at the virtual memory configuration and see, what that's like. It can be reconfigured if you know what you're doing after you've purchased it. I personally don't know how to do that, so I would call on an expert to help me out with it. But if you look at it when you're purchasing, it's just another thing to keep in consideration. Okay. Then we have the standard storage areas, beginning with a solid state drive. Now, I love solid state drives. Everybody ought to have one. They're not cheap. Most laptops, though, have a solid state drive now, not huge ones. If you want a really big one, you're going to pay a lot extra for that. But obviously, the more storage, the better. Okay. If you want a lot of storage for not very much money, we're still looking at standard mechanical hard drives. Okay. They're cheap, they're easy to use, they're a little slow, but you can also have external drives of either type that you can plug in via USB port if you need to add additional down the line. Okay. And then of course, well, very few laptops come with these anymore. And to be honest, how much do we really use them anymore? But desktops usually do still come with one, and that is an optical disk drive. Okay. These are all the farthest away from the processor, but they have the most capacity. So they're bigger, but they're slower. Yeah. So look and find the configuration that's going to work the best for you. Now, one of the configurations that I really like, a solid state drive, remember, uses electronic memory and has no motors or moving parts, but they're expensive. So look for a hybrid, preferably where All of your boot up instructions and the kernel of your operating system are on the solid state drive, and less important stuff is stored on the hard disk drive portion. Okay, so that means your computer boots up quickly and it gets all of its instructions quickly, but it may take a little while to load some programs. I mean, you're probably not even going to really notice, and to pull files from the standard hard disk drive storage. Okay. And the last thing I want to mention is there a difference between disk and disk? Well, obviously, one is spelled with a K, one is spelled with a C. But does that mean anything? It does. Disk with a K is a magnetic disk, like a standard hard drive. Okay? That stores information on a disk magnetically. Little magnetic particles are arranged either vertically or horizontally, depending on whether they're supposed to represent a 0 or a 1. Okay? That's magnetic storage. If you want to go really old school, floppy disks. Those are magnetic disks too. Okay? Disk with a C, that's, oh, there's examples. Yeah. Disk with a C is optical storage. Got ahead of myself for a second there. Optical storage would be a CD, a DVD, a Blu-ray disc, anything that looks like that. Okay? Now, depending on the configuration, whether it's a CD, DVD, or Blu-ray, they have different storage capacities, but they all store information via the same method, and that is that a laser burns little pits into the surface of the disk. You can't see them, but they're there. Okay? Those represent the ones. The absence of a pit would be a 0. It's still binary information. It's just the way it's encoded onto the disk is different. Okay? So yeah, there's a difference between disk with a K and disk with a C. Not everybody uses them correctly, but now you know, and you can. Okay, that's it for this chapter. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more detail in the textbook itself, so enjoy reading that. I will see you in the next chapter. Gurmagat agus